Okay, so I'm going to start right from the beginning. And this is probably hard to read, but what is oxalic acid? For the chemists in the group, there it is. It's the dihydrate, which means it has 2 waters on it. It's the strongest organic acid. It's 10 times or 100 times stronger than vinegar, and it's 70 times more toxic to mites than to bees. So that's important, right? And we're going to talk about how they think this stuff works, because believe it or not, they still don't really know. Oh, there you go. So it's found in all of these different vegetables. And I want you to remember this later on, because we're going to talk about why there's no limit for oxalic acid in honey and why you can use it now with honey supers on, okay? All right, so I saw all the hands that went up that use oxalic acid, but there's only one approved type of oxalic acid, and this is it. It's called apibioxal. How many of you guys are using this stuff? That's what I thought. So the EPA police are going to come and get you because that's an off-label use of the wood bleach that you're using with oxalic acid, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So you can imagine one of the reasons that people don't use it is it's a lot more expensive than the wood bleach that you buy at Home Depot, right? Okay, so how does it work? Too bad we can't see this. They don't really know how it works, but they think that it's absorbed through the feet of the mite. And I'm going to give you a new word here. I learned a new word. Empodia. That's the bottom of the mite's foot, the little tarsal end, okay? So they think it goes through the feet of the mite and kills it, but they don't really know. Okay, oh, this is too bad. You can't see these mites because these are 2 cells and there's probably 100 mites in there on these 2 cells. Okay, right? So we're going to talk about this. We all know it should be used during the broodless period, right? So late in the fall, winter, early in the spring, whenever there's, very little or no brood. And we're going to talk about, what happens if we use it when there's brood on. Oops, sorry. Can't see this. This is basically a graph from Randy Oliver, and it shows that it talks about what percentage of the mites are in the brood, what percentage are phoretic, and how much kill you get. And basically, it just reinforces the fact that when you have no brood in the hive, you'll get a 90% kill. Okay, and when you have 100% brood and no phoretic mites, you only kill 27%, and everything in between. So again, this is just to show what I just said, that it doesn't work when there's brood in the hive.
I don't know if you covered this, but what is phoretic mite?
So phoretic mite means that the mite is on the bee. Okay, so what happens is, typically the bee could be out foraging, or you could pick it up for another bee, but it'll hop onto the bee, and then it'll stay on the bee for a while. Typically, it will go between the different segments of the bee and suck the fat bodies. So a lot of people will say, oh, I don't see any mites in my hive. Well, you're not going to see most of the mites because they're, number one, either in the brood, or number two, they're on the belly of the bee and they're halfway hidden, okay? So you can't see them. So when the mite is on the bee, that's the phoretic stage. Then what they do is they walk around on the brood frames, and just before the brood gets capped, which is around day 8, 9, 10, whatever, they go into the cell. And then when the brood gets capped, that's where they multiply. Again, the first mite that they call it the foundress mite, that's the mother mite. The first mite that she lays is a male, and then, believe it or not, she breeds with that male, a little incestuous there, and then produces more mites. We know that they like the drone brood because the drone brood is capped for a longer period of time, so she can produce more mites. Okay, so this is one, and you can just see the graph goes like this and then down. This is where Randy Oliver did oxalic vapor vaporization on his hives for about 10 or 12 different 7-day periods. And what this really shows is, in order to really get any kind of a knockdown of the mites, you have to do it like 10 times. Okay, so I know a lot of people will use oxalic acid and they go, well, I'll do it at 4-day intervals, I'll do it 4 times, or I'll do it at 7-day intervals 4 times. Randy Oliver's data shows that even if you do it 10 times in a row, it's going to take you that long to really get an efficient kill. All right, does that surprise anybody? Yeah, right? Surprised me. Okay, so one of the things that you can do is, we say use it during a broodless period, is you can cage the queen, right, and create a broodless period and then use it. So that's, especially the Italian beekeepers like to do this, but there's something, this just shows a couple of different ways to cage the queen. You know, one, you could put her in a little cage like this where she can't really move around much, right? I think a better way to do it is to put a queen excluder in a box, a vertical queen excluder, and just put one frame with the queen on it so she can continue to lay during this period, right? And then you can take that brood out and get rid of it, all right? But at least she hasn't had to stop laying, right? Because we know we don't want our queen to stop laying, right? She's a laying machine, 1,000 a day, 1,500 a day. So I really like that idea of building a vertical queen excluder, put all your frames over here, and then you put the frame with the queen and allow her to lay on that frame, okay? And then you do that for 14 days, and then at 21 days, you do the oxalic acid treatment, and now you've got broodless hive, and you're killing a lot of the mites. This is pretty much the same thing. It's basically showing that the best kill you get is when you have a broodless period and you use oxalic acid vapor. It makes sense, right? Because if you go broodless for 21 days, you're not going to have any brood. And so now all of your mites are phoretic. They're on the bees, right? Which is where the oxalic acid vapor works. All right. So it used to be, and this is a busy slide, but it used to be that you couldn't use oxalic acid with honey supers on. Everybody remember that? So if you have some old Apibioxal at your house, it's going to say can't be used with honey supers on. Well, they changed that back in 2021, I think. Yes, 2021. And the reason they did this goes back to what I was saying about oxalic acid being in all of these vegetables. What they said is, if you use oxalic acid vapor with honey supers on, the amount of oxalic acid that's going to be in the honey is minuscule compared to the amount that's in rhubarb, okay, or many of the other things that you eat. So there's no reason to say you can't use it, and there's no reason to have a tolerance for it. So they didn't even set one. They didn't say, you know, it has to be below X ppm in order to eat it. Okay, so everybody understand that? We're eating a lot more oxalic acid in our daily lives than we're eating when we eat honey that came from supers that were on our hives. Okay, so that's why you can use it with honey supers on now. But the label is the law. How many people have heard that, right? So you got to follow the label that's on there. So if you have old Apibioxal and it says you can't use it, technically you can't use that with honey supers on. So this is a racket. So you got to go out and buy some new. It has a label that says, oh, can be used with honey supers on it. But really, are the EPA police going to come after you? I don't think so. Okay, so I don't even know if the new label is out. Does anybody know? It was submitted back in 2021, but I'm not sure. I would hope that it's out by now. but I haven't really seen it. All right, so these are the 3 approved methods for using it: the dribble, the spray, and vaporization. And just a hand, how many use the dribble? Spray your packages when you get them. It's all vaporization, right? So we're using vaporization. We'll talk some more. So that's what we'll focus on. But I would say the other 2 ways are very effective. And the dribble is a bit safer because you're not heating it up. And this is a picture. You use 5 milliliters per seam of bees. So you get this big syringe, right? And you go in between the frames and the seam. You put 5 mils, 5 mils, 5 mils, 5 mils. And it's very effective. It works.
When you say seam, you mean between the 2 frames?
Yes, where the bee space is.
So 45 millimeters per box.
Per box. Yep. Yes, that's correct. Let's see if I can see it here. I think it's on here. There it is. 1-to-1. So this is 2.5 to 3.5 by weight oxalic acid in a 1-to-1 sugar solution. So again, if you go on Randy Oliver's site, Scientific Beekeeping, he'll give you the exact numbers of how to do this. We have, I know a couple of commercial beekeepers, maybe some of you folks know them, that live on Pleasant Run near me, and they use this very effectively every year on their hives.
I think that's about 1 ounce per quart.
A good time to use it is on the winter cluster, okay, because all the bees are in one place now. So some people will do that. Now, to me, the downside of that is the bees are clustered. Maybe you're only getting it on the outside of the bees. I would prefer to use it when they're spread over the frames and do each seam. But people do use it that way.
So Bob, when you're doing the seam, you're actually just going down the hole and dribbling it right onto the bees?
Yes. Yep, right onto the bees. And you got to be careful because you literally want to limit it to 5 mils. So you kind of, there's a technique involved. You have to get used to, well, how much is 5 mils? And you have to have a nice syringe that's calibrated that tells you how much you're putting on it. But they do sell them, so obviously you can buy them at any bee supply store. Okay, spray. This is another one. This is typically used on package bees, right? Because why? Why would you use it on package bees? No brood. They're all phoretic. The mites are all on bees, right? So you get a package, you don't know whether they've been treated or not, usually, right? You assume they probably have. Oh, that's good. Here we go. Well, I'm going to post this up there so you can see it, but there's instructions on how to treat package bees, and it's all up here on the side. You can't see it. I'm not going to go through it. But the bottom line is your mites are phoretic at that point. And there's a minimum amount of them. It's a great time to spray your bees with oxalic acid. This is again goes through how to treat. Oh, too bad this one doesn't show up. But let's go to this next one. This is a great picture, but you can't see it. This is a bee. This is a bee that's covered in oxalic acid crystals. Okay, so what happens is this stuff goes into the hive as a vapor, right? And it condenses on the bees. And this is a picture where it looks like somebody sprayed powdered sugar on him. Okay?
You know, we could have the same presentation later after it gets a little darker, around 7:30. You guys want to come back? I'll be good.
You were talking about spraying the packages.
Yes.
Could you technically take a package, put it in, say, like a rubber leaf bin, and hit it with vapor? You know,
I don't see why not.
it's a thought. I mean,
I would wonder about the dose, that's all.
well, I mean, you do probably about the same.
Yeah.
1/4 teaspoon per
Right.
box.
Yeah.
You know,
Like maybe just a little more hazardous for the beekeeper. because you know what we're going to talk about this when we get to the vaporization, but clearly vaporizing this stuff is the most hazardous way to use it, right? Okay. I know a very experienced beekeeper from Connecticut, Bill Hesback, who had this stuff blow up in his face. And fortunately, he was wearing a full face respirator, and they showed a picture of it, and it was just covered with oxalic acid. So it happens to the best of us, okay? Because these tools that we use, they clog, and if they clog, you've really got the potential for a serious accident. So we'll talk more about that with vaporization. Yes.
So you think your packages in May, right?
Yeah.
And the temperature it's not always cool enough. Don't you have to store your vapor at a certain temperature?
Just remember to repeat the question.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So the question is, the temperature is a little bit cooler in the spring. Do you have to have a certain temperature for oxalic acid vaporization? And again, I'm not an expert. I don't think so. Anybody else have a different opinion? Anybody used it like that? Has anybody sprayed packages with it? No, I don't think so, Alice, but I really don't know, so I don't want to mislead you. Oh, so when we start talking about vaporization, people will talk about vaporization versus sublimation. Okay, does everybody know what the difference is? So sublimation is when the oxalic acid goes from a solid directly to a gas. Okay, vaporization is when it goes from a solid to a liquid to a gas. So how many people have heard that vaporization is sublimation? Ever heard that? It's not. It's not true. It's vaporization. It goes through the three phases. It goes from solid to liquid, and then it's a vapor. Just put that up there because there's been some confusion around what these different terms are. Adria.
I'm looking at the data site, and it says for oxalic acid vaporization, you need an outside temperature of 37 degrees Fahrenheit. There is no top temperature. So Alice, it's safe to use it, at any point the bees are going to be moving.
Thank you. Perfect. Everybody hear that? 37 degrees. Okay, so when we talk about vaporizers, there's two kinds. There's a passive vaporizer, which is probably the type that most of you use. And then there's an active vaporizer where you might heat this stuff up with some kind of a gas and then blow it into the hive, okay? So that the passive, you put it in the hive and then you vaporize it. The active, you've got the vaporizer going and then you put it in the hive, okay?
And your hive is pretty much sealed up.
Yes. Yep.
So
No screen bottom boards. Yeah, so here we go. This basically shows a towel in the entrance to close it off. Close the screen bottom boards, measure the required amount, lay an old towel across the front, set your timer 2.5 to 3 minutes. Okay, energize the vaporizer, stand back. And again, I would tell you, make sure you're wearing protective equipment, okay? And that's not just a respirator and gloves, that's your eyes also, okay? So if you buy anybody buy a full face respirator, they're expensive. They're probably about 135, 150 bucks, right? So most people don't buy them. But if you're going to wear a regular respirator, make sure you have the right cartridges that are for acid gases. That's the yellow cartridge. And make sure you're protecting your eyes with goggles. Oh, and gloves, of course.
Yeah, upwind helps.
Yeah.
Upwind.
Yes, upwind. But, I think too many people rely on upwind, okay? So, yeah, upwind is good, but that's only if you have a respirator and gloves and goggles on. This is personal protective equipment. This is from the label. Long sleeve shirt, long pants, chemical resistant gloves, goggles, half face respirator. And Randy Oliver recommends carrying a neutralizing solution, and he makes that out of baking soda. 10 tablespoons per gallon. So he brings this out with him, so just in case he gets it on his skin or something happens, he's got neutralizing aid. And I think that's a great idea. And I don't hear that talked about really enough. All right, now we're going to go into extended release. So how many have heard about Randy's studies with shop towels? Okay, he got this idea actually from Argentina, because in Argentina there is already an extended release oxalic acid that's available, registered and available. It's called an aluin cap, okay, and it's a cellulose strip that's soaked with oxalic acid and glycerin, and you can't really see it. It looks a lot like, what are the messy strips we put in there, brown strips? Hop guard. It looks like a hop guard strip, okay, basically. But this is where Randy got the idea, because it's already approved in Argentina, all right? So he started with shop towels, and that's what this picture showed. He had to get a special permit in California in order to do this, because it's an off-label use. But he started with blue shop towels, and he liked the way it worked. He thought it worked really well. So he uses 55 to 60 square inches towel with a 1-to-1 solution, 2 full months in there. And that's what he thinks the beauty of it is that it's released slowly over 2 full months, so that any of the mites that are in the brood are going to become phoretic, and that's how it kills over time. So takes a long time. And he also recommends to do it proactively, which he says do it early in the season. So, don't wait until your mite count is up at 15 or 20 or 100. Do it early in the spring, so you start out low, and then your mite count hopefully will stay low for the rest of the year. Okay, this is what I said. Now, this unfortunately doesn't show, but he's trying a lot of different matrices. So he's trying felt.
You're looking at the next slide.
Oh, I am. Okay.
Yeah. So the slide that's showing is the slide on this side.
Got it.
That's the next slide.
That's the next slide, if you can see it. Anyway, he tried these different matrices, and what he found was that something called a Swedish sponge works the best, but they're expensive. Okay, and so he's still looking for a cheaper way to do it. And again, most people that I know that are using this method are using the blue shop towels. Okay, but there are some negative effects, and this comes from Penn State, from the laboratory there. If overused or used at high doses, oxalic acid can harm bees by crystallizing in the midgut of the larva. So it doesn't affect the adult bees, but it can cause larval mortality, okay? So it can kill some of your young bees. So that's why you want to use the recommended dose. And we're going to talk about dose. And just like anything else, you want to prevent resistance, so you want to use IPM, an integrated pest management approach, where you're using all different methods depending on what your counts are, and you don't go to the really heavy chemical, especially the synthetic chemicals, unless you really have to. Your counts are out of control. Now, Randy tried to do this. In New Zealand, they have what's called an own use exemption. And just to paraphrase it, it basically says if you're a beekeeper, you can play around with this stuff in your backyard and use it however you want. All right? Randy went to the EPA and said, hey, how come can't we get an own use exemption? And they go, are you out of your mind? So they said no, big time no. But in Australia, you can go home and you can use this stuff however you want without any special permit. EPA also has a way that you can use it, but there's a bunch of conditions that you have to. The person conducting the test does not expect to receive any benefit in pest control. So in other words, it's got to be an experiment. It can't be I'm using this to lower the mite counts in my hive. So if you do that, then the EPA is okay with it. So this is very interesting. So Randy did his study, and he felt the stuff was really effective. So how many know who Jennifer Berry is? Jennifer Berry? Okay, so she's from Florida. She worked with Keith Delaplane. And I didn't know this. How many think she has a PhD? Doctor. She doesn't. Okay, she's going for a PhD right now. But I think so many of us think so much of her, and we've seen her a number of times. We've seen her talk, and we think she's Dr. Berry. Well, she's not. So she's going actually for her PhD right now, and she's doing a lot of her work on this extended release oxalic acid. So she tried to duplicate Randy Oliver's experiment with the shop towels, and she found that it didn't work. So she wrote to Randy and she said, Randy, I did everything you did and it didn't work. And the one thing about these scientific studies is they have to be reproducible, right? You have to be able to show that it wasn't just a fluke, that you can do it and I can do it as long as we follow the same method. So, and here's what really surprises me. They came to the conclusion that it was the difference in the humidity in the different test areas. In other words, Randy uses it in an area that's very dry, low humidity, and she was using it in Florida where it's really high humidity. Now, why doesn't that argument hold water? Literally, water. Because what's the humidity in the hive? The bees control the humidity in the hive. Doesn't matter what it's outside, right? They're going to control it. It's the same whether it's high humidity outside or low humidity outside. Where you're using it inside the hive, where the shop towel is the same. So I don't think that's the reason that it didn't work. But that was the explanation that they came up with. See what else she said. Where you are located affects the mite's ecology. He agreed, from what I read on his website, he agreed with that. He stated it as fact.
He agreed with your rebuttal.
No, he agreed with the fact that he thinks it was due to the environment being different. Okay?
Well, I would tend to disagree with you on that. How can bees change what's going around them to that extent? I mean, I can see them adding humidity, but how would they dehumidify that? That's actually going to increase the humidity.
Why would they want? I'm saying they keep it at a constant level. Okay, I mean, if you have anybody have brood minders they put in their hives, measures temperature and humidity. What does humidity look like? Pretty straight, right?
What's the humidity at now? I'm just kind of curious.
I think it's at least 80%, isn't it? Up there, around there, 75, 85%.
Yeah.
Pretty high.
Well, I think there is something to that.
Okay.
It's so low in Northern California where it is.
Mm-hmm.
It comes to 10 or 15% humidity. There are humidity that's coming in 60 to 70%.
Okay.
I know it's different in the hive, but the bees have to react differently to get that humidity.
To that level. Yeah. So they have to add a lot of moisture to it to get it up there. Could be.
Yeah, but isn't the moisture emitting from the collected nectar and the fact that it's a walled, minimal airflow environment?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be very interesting to know what Brandon's hive humidity level is versus the one down in Florida.
Yeah.
And compare the two, and then actually do it in the first place.
Yeah.
But actually, like introducing me, because I see if humidity is lower, then the oxalic would dry out, I guess.
Yeah, faster, right?
Yeah, faster. So I think that's why when trees shrunk, they hold more moisture.
They hold more moisture. Okay.
I think that's what I wrote.
All right. Very good. Good. So again, it's open to debate. So what do we need? We need somebody else to try it, exactly following that protocol, and see what happens. This is the other one. Jennifer Berry also did vaporization. She did it 5 days apart, 7 times. And what she found is that 5 days apart, 7 treatments with oxalic acid vapor did not reduce the amount of mites in the hive. It didn't allow them to increase, so they stayed steady, where normally they would probably be on the increase, right? But she found that it didn't work. Now, how many people have used oxalic acid with brood in their hive? Right? And what have you found? It didn't work. Okay. Because I know some people that do it and they say it does work. All right, but Jennifer is saying no, and this is part of her PhD thesis.
I'm going to rephrase that. Work successfully once, unsuccessfully the second time.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, so she's doing a couple of different studies now. She's actually using the aluin caps from Argentina, and she's working on that. She works with a beekeeper called Bob Binney. Anybody heard of Bob Binney? Bob Binney is a commercial beekeeper from Georgia, and he's the one who's been supplying her the couple of hundred hives that she needs to do this research. So, and you can't see it here, but there I have the reference in the back. You can go on YouTube and watch the interview with Bob Binney and her talking about the different research that she's doing and where it is. So she's still got more to come out, but I think the key takeaway is, and this next slide shows it, unfortunately, what that shows is that it doesn't lower the control group, the mites go up. When you do the OA vapor with brood, it just stays the same, okay? So it doesn't decrease the mites. So if you've got a high count, it's not going to knock the mites down, but it's going to prevent it from going any higher. Everybody understand that? That was a surprise to me. I didn't know that. So here are the references. These are a couple of the papers. Oh, one other thing I didn't mention. So people that vaporize, what dose do you use? 1 gram, right? Using 1 gram in the vaporizer? Well, Cameron Jack, he spoke last year at EAS, and he has shown that 1 gram is not an effective dose. It doesn't work. 2 grams is not an effective dose. It doesn't work. That you need at least 3 or 4 grams in order for it to have an effective kill on the mites. Okay, how many people had heard that? Yeah, he's been talking about it for about a year now. And I think he's trying to get the label changed, because again, the label is the law. So just because Cameron Jack says he should be using 3 grams doesn't mean you should be using 3 grams, right? But I just want you to understand that somebody has to reproduce his study to show that that is in fact true, that the 1 milligram dose doesn't work. Okay? So that's it for me. I now want to open it up if anybody has any comments, either about something I said or something they've done or something they've noticed with oxalic acid. Go ahead, Tim. Yeah, we'll put it out there. Because again, there's a lot more detail that you can't see. So like if you want to know how to make up the solutions and you want to know how to do the spray of the packages, I give you step-by-step there. But more important are the references, which is the last slide. I really encourage you to watch the Bob Binney YouTubes. They're not that long, and it's an interview with Jennifer Berry, basically, and she's talking about what she found in her research. It's very interesting.
You had the old wood bleach. Still use it?
The label, here, this is my EAS Master Beekeeper. The label is the law. I can't tell you to do anything other than what's on the label. The label is the law. You want to bleach wood? You buy wood bleach. You want to kill mites? You buy apibioxal. No, seriously, nobody's going to come after you for not using it off-label. But that's the point. This is considered a pesticide. And the EPA is very strict about how they regulate pesticides. And that comment, the label is the law. If you use it anything other than what it says on the label, that's an off-label use. And that's a violation. Yeah.
You wanted to comment, I've been using nothing but for the last 2 years. Sublimation. And I'm at 30 hives now, and the comment about that the mites stay steady. So I do mite watch early, and then I don't continue mite watch. The reason I like oxalic is you don't have to clear it for that. The hives are closed, you fill them up, in an hour and a half, I can see all the hives will be done. The way I monitor it is I have about 8 hives between bodies. And I just watch 24 hours, I go out and I count the mites. My son goes crazy because I some would have 15. And I treat until I get 0 drop. When I get 0 drop, I'm done. It takes till about the first of the year. As the brood contracts, the numbers of dwindle, the drop, but it takes a weekly treatment of 75 days so you get 0 mites. But then coming in spring, I have 0 mites across the board. And right now, I have 2 colonies. One had a 15, one had a 4. Everything else is 1 to 6. All the way through the notice.
So there it is again. You want to start low. You do this early in the year or late in the fall or the winter. You start out low, you're going to be a lot better off in the summer.